Welcome to You Make the Difference. I'm Wanda Walker, and today I am talking to the new pastor of the LaGrange United Methodist Church, Pastor Brian Germano.
Germano. That's okay.
Yeah,
I just tell people think Geronimo.
Geronimo, that's right.
Pastor Geronimo.
Yes. Well, Pastor Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're
Good
so
to be
glad
here.
you're in LaGrange.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, and we know that you have lots of ideas, and we're really interested in hearing what they are.
Excited to be here.
Yes.
Excited to be here.
Okay. First of all, tell us about your background as a pastor, and then how you got to LaGrange.
Well, a little bit of my background. First of all, as a pastor, I started out as a, well, I graduated, actually, some people would be interested in this area to know that I was a graduate of LaGrange College. I was a history major and in pre-law. So when I graduated from college here, I actually went to law school. And I started out in law school, and God got a hold of me, though, and had another plan in mind. I didn't finish law school. I was up in Virginia, but came back to Georgia thinking I was going to finish law school in the Atlanta area at Emory University, and instead decided to go into the ordained ministry, the Methodist ministry. And I had that call for quite a while. I was planning on being active in my local church anyway. I'm originally from the Fayetteville area, Fayetteville, Georgia, and or Southside Atlanta, East Point College Park is where I grew up. But I answered that call when I was in law school. I was dating my wife now of 27 years, who was my fiance at the time, but had a number of people encourage me about going into the ministry. And but I remember my fiance at the time told me, Brian, either God's not talking or you're not listening. Yes. So you know which one it was. It was the latter. So when I finally answered that call, I went to Candler School of Theology at Emory University, and graduated from there, and then started actually serving churches. Actually, while I was in seminary, I started serving churches in the Atlanta area, and so that's how and that was back in 1989.
Yes.
So it's been a little while.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, and so that got me into the Methodist as a pastor, into the Methodist structure, and I've been serving churches really now for the 27 years, 28. I'm not a math person, but I've served churches in College Park, in Carrollton, where our daughter was born, for about 4 years. I was in Augusta, Georgia, as a pastor at a large church there, specializing in evangelism and congregational care. And I served then church in Cartersville, Georgia,
yes,
northwest of Atlanta. And for the last 10 years, I've been a pastor of the East Cobb United Methodist Church in Marietta, Georgia. Now, you may or may not know, but you asked your question, how a little background about the Methodist, being a Methodist pastor, and how I became pastor here at LaGrange first. In our tradition, in our Christian tradition, we're not called by the local church to go to the local church. The church doesn't call us. We believe the biblical method is really is a sent system. Paul and the other apostles were actually sent to there. They weren't called by. They weren't asked to come there by their local groups in Ephesus or in Corinth or whatever. Paul was sent. Paul, the Jerusalem Council of Acts 15, actually sent the apostles and the others. And so Paul would go and he would minister in the area for a period of time, and then he would move to another area, and someone else would go in his place to follow along with him. That's the way our structure works, and our structure works with our bishop sending us to a particular location for a period of time, and then after a period of time we are moved to a new location. So that's why I've served about 7 churches now. This is my 7th church that I've served. And we believe that's a more biblical method, because the idea is that we build the church around the people, not around the pastor. Now, that's not to say that we don't have pastors sometimes that stay a long time.
Yes.
10 years in our tradition is a very, very long time. The average stay for a United Methodist pastor is more like 5 or 6 years in a location. But I've served churches, 3 years when I was in seminary, 4 years in Carrollton, 5 years in Augusta, 5 years in Cartersville, and then 10 years in Marietta. And now here, I've been here, 5 months or so.
Yes.
So I was actually, last spring, my bishop, through his person, what we call the district superintendent, let me know that I would be, I was on what we call the move list, and I would be moving that year. And what they try to do is they try to match up the needs of the congregation with the skills and not only the needs of the congregation, but the skills of the pastor that they're sending. And so they try to get a good fit. Sometimes it's not a good fit, but it's like any other system. It has got its pros and its cons. But I've always, in the 28 years that I've been doing it, every place that I've been sent, God has used us in that place.
Yes.
You know, we sometimes say God works through our bishop, sometimes in spite of our bishop.
Yes.
So that's okay. You know, the point is that God uses us wherever we find ourselves. And I'm just excited to be here as the new pastor at LaGrange First Methodist. I'm looking forward to what God and we are going to be doing together, and looking forward to just the ministry that we're going to have together. I don't know how many years that'll be. You know, my 10 years in Marietta, I was not appointed for 10 years. I was appointed for 1 year 10 times.
Oh, wow.
So each year,
Yes.
you know, each year we were asked, do we want to stay or go? And the church is asked, do you want your pastor to stay or go? And based upon what those two responses are, based upon how long you've been there, whether you're in a building program or other things going on, if there's some special circumstances, your wife's in school or daughter's in school or whatever, that determines, and also the needs of the churches involved.
Right.
That determines whether or not the bishop sends you back or not. At any given year in our North Georgia Methodist Conference here in the North Georgia area, which is, if you draw a line a little bit north of Columbus to a little bit north of Macon to a little south of Augusta, there's about 1,000 United Methodist churches in that area. And any given year, about 1/3 of the pastors in that area would be moving. And so in this particular case, we had a wonderful pastor at LaGrange First Methodist, Dr. Harold Lawrence, who was my predecessor, who had been there 11 years, and he retired last year. And so the church here was needing a new pastor. And so I was tapped and asked, we don't get to pick where we go.
Right.
We go where we're sent. It's like being in the military.
Yes.
We go where we're sent. And so we don't get to pick, or we don't even get a list to say, well, yeah, I'd pick this one, this one. No, we go where we're sent. And so I was asked to come to LaGrange first. And I'm not sure if they knew at the time that I was a LaGrange College grad. But it turned out, you know, it was a God thing.
Yes.
Because even if they did, I don't know if they did or didn't know, but it didn't hurt that I was.
That's right.
Because that's been a great opportunity for me to come back to LaGrange.
Now, when you were at LaGrange College, were you pursuing being a pastor or not?
No.
So when you walked by the First Methodist Church, you never thought that you would come back and be the pastor?
Well, the interesting thing about that is I was very active in lay ministry when I was here at the college. I was the president of our Wesley Fellowship, which is the Methodist group on the campus of LaGrange College. And so I was the president of that for 3 years. And LaGrange First Methodist Church was the church that I attended.
Really?
So, you know, was that 29 years ago, I was in college and I came to church at the church that I'm now serving. So that's kind of a, you know, ironic twist, a God thing. I was a history major and a minor in music, and I actually played organ and several other things. I actually learned how to play organ on the First Methodist Church organ. I don't play anymore, so don't ask for me to play organ.
Yes.
But I don't, not organ at least. But I still do a lot of music things. I sing and play guitar, play trumpet, and do some other things as well. But so it is kind of interesting coming back to, you know, where I was, you know, all those years ago.
Yes.
And it's kind of, interestingly enough, come to find out, our church has a long history. Back to 1828. I don't know all the history yet. I'm still learning some of that. But in the whole, however many years that is, I'm the first senior pastor that they've had at that church that is actually an alumni of LaGrange College.
Wow.
And there's been many, many preachers go into the ministry from LaGrange College.
Yes.
But I'm actually the first one that is an alumni to actually come back and be sent as the pastor of the church. So that's kind of neat too.
I believe God's doing something with that.
Must be something up there.
Now, so you were at LaGrange College, and that's almost 30 years ago.
Right.
And you came back to LaGrange, and what were your impressions from having been away 30 years and coming back? Had we changed a lot or not changed a lot, or what did you think?
I'm going to answer a good Methodist way, yes. Because we tend to be a both-and kind of a denomination or tradition. Yes, there's some changes. Yes, there's things that have not changed. You know, it's hard to put my finger on. There are some things that I remember that haven't really changed that much. I remember Charlie Joseph's, and I remember some of the other places in town. some things have changed. I remember we used to go, when I was in college, we used to go over on Commerce Avenue, what is now I think it's I can't remember, it's the Chinese restaurant there, and it used to be Shoney's. And
yes, that's right.
We would get hot fudge cakes, hot fudge sundaes and hot fudge cakes at like 11 o'clock at night,
Right.
Really good for you, right at, very healthy stuff there for college fare. But we used to get that, and so there are some things that have changed. The community itself, I do remember the mall being here, and I'm trying to remember, I think the mall had just come, and this is the late 80s.
Probably so.
Late 80s,
yes.
I think it had just come, so it was kind of new. Now, it's a little different now. There are some things that haven't made it. I think the economy's changed a lot. And, just from what I've heard and just the stories I've heard, I know when I was here, we had Milliken and West Point Pepperell and other things that are now closed. And so I think in many ways, if I could say this kind of as a new person, as an outsider, I think LaGrange as a community is trying to rediscover who it is. It's trying to rediscover its identity. Who are we now that we're not defined by the corporations and by the groups that used to define LaGrange and Troup County, the textiles.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not defined by textiles anymore. We have Duracell, and we have Kia, we have other types of great industry that have come into town, but it's diversified a little bit more, and it's not centered around just one type of industry. And so I think the community, in some ways, 30 years ago, knew who it was more. There was more of an articulation of who it was, and also 30 years ago, places like Noonan and maybe perhaps Auburn and Alpalaca area weren't as built up, so people came here as the center of their universe. Now there's a lot of where people, we go up to Noonan to shop, or we'll go over to Columbus or whatever. And so there's still trying to a reinvention of who are we now that we're not defined by the things that we used to define us. I think in many ways, our church and others are kind of still trying to figure that out as well. I think our churches are part of that rediscovering of the identity,
right?
Because we used to be defined in certain ways, and it's not the same way anymore. And I think when the economy collapsed in 2009, just for the whole country, I think from what I hear, LaGrange took a hit from that too, because I think there was some projects and some endeavors that were in process that just stopped.
Right.
And nothing's been really done with those since then. But I think we've got great leadership in our community now. I think Mayor Jim Thornton is doing a great job, and he actually is a member of LaGrange First Methodist.
Right.
It's been a pleasure and just a privilege just getting to know him and he and his family. His mother actually is my secretary,
right?
And I just could not do without her. Dodie Patterson, she's a wonderful, wonderful secretary. But Jim is doing Jim and the council, the city council is doing a great job, I think, trying to figure out how we can diversify who we are as a community. I think the Sweetland Amphitheater and the new, the Gray Wolf Lodge or everything that's coming, those will be great additions to the community in the future that may bring more economic growth here. And as a result of that, there'll be new people moving in. Now, to some people, that's a scary thing. Growth, anytime you have a community like LaGrange, it's been the same for a long time. And so that's, you ask what's different, what's the same. One thing I appreciate that is the same is that kind of sense of everybody knowing each other.
Right.
And I do remember that very much. Of course, I was a college kid, so I didn't really get out in the community much. But what I did see and know about the community, it was very close-knit. And there is still that sense today. I'm originally a city boy. I'm from Atlanta, and so I'm kind of not used to that. But my wife is, and it reminds her a lot of her hometown up in Tennessee. That it's just everybody knows everybody and knows everybody's business too. So you got to watch what you say and who you say it about, because they might be your next door neighbor or whatever. We just bought a house and over in another part of town, and we found out just a couple of weeks ago that our next door neighbor is a church member of ours.
Good.
We didn't know that when we bought the house, and we're looking forward to getting to know them. But things like that where there's a sense of community,
right,
that you don't find a lot of times in metro kinds of communities like Metro Atlanta. And even areas like Noonan and others, Peachtree City, which used to be more probably like LaGrange, but now Atlanta has kind of swallowed them up.
That's right.
And LaGrange, though, the good thing about LaGrange is it's close enough to Columbus and Auburn and Noonan and those areas that you can do stuff, but it's all still got its own identity. And I think if we can capitalize on that and help people see there's some real advantages to that. I think that'll help us as a community, and in our churches, it helps us be able to identify who we are.
Yes, and I think that's so important. You know, I love going to the restaurant and knowing people, or going into shops and being able to see people I haven't seen, but know them. And you know, I don't think I'd want to live somewhere where you go and you don't know anybody. Yes, and so it is nice to have those relationships and build on those. And
unless you're wanting to be anonymous like me at times, and I can't go anywhere without somebody, oh, that's the preacher from the First Methodist Church.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, and they'll come up to me and see, I'm at the stage now where they know me, but I'm still working on getting to know people. We have over 1,000 members of our church, and so it's a big church.
Yes.
So still, you know, I'll go in the Publix or Kroger or something, and they'll come up to me and, you know, say hello, and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to know you.
I know.
It's like, oh, well, hello, how are you?
They have one person to get to know.
Exactly, and I have over 1,000 to get to know. So
that's right.
It just takes a little, but I'm getting there. It just takes a little longer.
Yes.
It takes a little longer.
Okay, so tell me about your vision for the church.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll just say, when it comes to pastors and visions for God's people, not just pastors, but for leadership, the leadership of God's people. If you look throughout the Old and New Testament, there's really two models, and the Moses model is one model where he kind of went up to the side of Mount Sinai and came back with the Ten Commandments and just sort of gave them to everybody. But I want you to notice even about that one, that vision, it was not Moses' vision, it was God's vision for the people. So first I would say, I mean, and I understand what you're asking. You ask, tell me about your vision for your church. It's not my church, first of all, it's God's church.
Right.
And it's the people's church. It's not, so, and again, in our system, we build it around, we move our pastors, one of the reasons we move it is so it is obvious that it's built around the people, not around just the pastor. And the idea is that over the course of 20 or 30 years, you have different pastors with different skill sets. And no one pastor has all the skill sets necessary to build a church over the long haul. But over the course of 20 or 30 years, if you have 4 or 5 pastors, you might get different skill sets to do that. But one way is that, okay, God gives the vision to the pastor, and the pastor comes and just shares it with the congregation. The problem with that model, and it works if you're starting something new. It's required if you're starting a new church or a new type of ministry. You have to have a vision from God that one person has and shares it. But in the New Testament and others, where you have existing structures, where you have existing churches, where you have existing ministries, the better model, the more biblical model, the one that really Jesus kind of tended to use as well, is to get people involved. I mean, Jesus didn't try to just save the world by himself. He involved his disciples. He involved his larger group. He even sent his disciples out 2 by 2, not 1 by 1. And so the idea is to get many people involved around God's vision for the people, not just my vision or even the church's vision. It is really God's vision for a church. And my belief is that God gives vision to a people, but they might not be able to articulate it or know it. The role of the leader or the pastor is to help draw that out, to create processes and structures, to create a way to elicit out of the people what God's vision is for that church or for that group. So people ask me, you know, well, Pastor Brian, what's your vision for a church? I don't know yet.
Yes.
I've not been there long enough to identify. And it's not that I'm not prayerful or spiritual about it. It's just I'm also smart enough to know that I don't come with all the answers. There's a long history of our church that I'm just the next piece of the puzzle in the long history of leaders of our church. So I would kind of be arrogant to come in and think that I just have the answers and I'm just going to give it to you. There have been some little changes that we've done since I've been there just to kind of get us back on track, I think. But the long haul for our church, what we want to do, what I want us to do, my vision really, if you will, is to create a process so the church can discover its vision. So that's my vision. My vision is that we create a process so that together we can have Sunday school classes and the different, we have 3 different services at our church, and each service, sometimes, you know, there's different people attending, and there are 3 different styles. And sometimes in churches like ours where you have different services, there's a tendency to think, well, you know, everybody has to be like my service and just my style, the contemporary service or the chapel service or the more traditional sanctuary service. And so it ends up being almost a little bit like 3 separate churches. But really, if you think about it, a church like LaGrange First Methodist or First Baptist or First Presbyterian, any of the churches here in town. Really, we're one people, we're one family, part of a larger family that is not just Methodist, but we're the family of God in LaGrange, Georgia.
The Church of LaGrange.
And the Church of LaGrange.
Right.
And so, whatever denomination or tradition it might be, we're just one piece of that puzzle. And but in our particular piece of that puzzle, that's called LaGrange First United Methodist Church, my role is to help us figure out getting all those pieces together, all those different groups, all those different little V visions. I've told people in my church before, I think what we have and what many churches have is each group sometimes has its own little V vision that are sometimes competing with each other.
Right.
What we need is a big V vision, capital V vision, that unites all the groups together behind what does God want us to do. Now, coming up with that doesn't happen overnight, though. Something like that takes 6 to 9 months to prepare or more.
Yes.
To do it right. To get everybody on board, you've got to get input, you've got to hear from people, you've got to do surveys, you've got to ask people's input and opinions and thoughts. What do you think we're called to do? What is it that you at this church that you wish would never change? What about this church do you wish, if there's one thing, would change? And those are the types of questions we ask. Leadership is not about having all the right answers, it's about asking the right questions.
Yeah, and Jesus used that method, didn't he?
He did. He, the Pharisees and even the disciples would come to him and ask him, and Peter would come up to in Mark, I think it's Mark 8, that came up to Peter and said, well, the people say you're the Son of God. Are you? Well, who do you say that I am?
That's right.
And, and the same way with the Pharisees, they would ask him questions, well, what do you think? And then he would ask them questions as a way of getting them into thinking about what God's vision for them might be.
Yes.
And
so I really like that you are interested in meeting with other pastors. Mm-hmm. You want to meet with pastors that are pastor the Baptist Church mm-hmm. and the Church of God and mm-hmm. the Church of Christ. Tell me what you see in that and also why that's so important to you.
First of all, I'll answer the last one first.
Okay.
I think it's so important because I think today, more than any time in, well, maybe not more than any time in history, but more than any time in recent history, it's important that the Church of Jesus Christ be unified, not in terms of its theology or belief or practice, but in terms of the world, the unbelieving world, seeing us being able to work together and do things together and say that we don't have to all look alike. We can practice diversity within our unity. But they need to see that we're all on the same page in terms of our belief that the answer to the world's problems is Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And we need Jesus Christ in our lives, in our hearts, in our world. Not to beat people over the head with that, but the answer to all the struggles, the violence of the world is not more violence. It's not just going and killing all the Muslims. It's, love overcomes violence, and love overcomes all the problems of the world. And all you have to do is look at the nonviolent movements throughout history that have overcome that. Gandhi's movement, Martin Luther King Jr. And you find that love is the one that overcomes that. Jesus himself taught that. And so if that's the case, then it's important that yes, we might do things differently, us and the Baptist Church, the Presbyterian Church, some non-denominational churches or whatever, Pentecostal churches, Catholic Church. We may do things differently. We may practice, and we have slightly different beliefs, but it's important that the world also see that we are doing some things together, like feeding the hungry, taking care of the homeless, looking after the people that have needs in our community, the people in jail and prison or whatever the needs might be, taking care of the orphans and widows. And that's what James asked us to do. It's pure religion is to look after the widows and the orphans. And we are to do that. And yes, we can do that as separate churches, and we should be doing some of that, but there should be at least a few things that we do together. And again, I have not been here very long, but it seems to me that each church is kind of doing its own little thing.
Yes.
And not really, I don't see a lot of things that we're doing together. I see some great ministries that are attempting to do that, but it seems like if it's not one church's idea, that they don't participate. And what I'd love us to do, I noticed there's no ministerial association, for example.
Well, there's the Troup County Baptist Association, ministerial association, and then there is another ministerial association too. So There are probably a couple, but...
But the Baptist Association is for Baptist.
Yes.
We have a Methodist one that's for Methodist.
Yes.
Where is the one that's for everybody?
For the Church of LaGrange.
Where is the one that Methodists and Baptists and Catholic priest and Episcopalian rector and a non-denominational church pastor would feel welcome?
Yes.
That's what I don't see it.
Well, let's do it.
And so, you know, I don't know what that will look like in the future, but I think those would be some things that I would love for us to do. I think it starts with, I think going forward as a community, I think the church here in LaGrange, we have a unique role that you don't find in Metro Atlanta or other places. The church still holds a lot of sway,
yes.
a lot of, and that's a good thing, by
yes.
the way. In the community, there's a lot of respect for the church, maybe not as much as it once had, just like the other parts of the U.S., that you don't have people don't respect the church as much, but the church represents Jesus Christ as a movement in the world, and so it's important for us as the people of God to do things that will help us to connect with not only individual churches but with the church in general. And you know, if they don't find what they need at my church, you know, maybe I can direct them to the First Baptist Church or First Presbyterian Church. But we've got to work together, and we can't be territorial about the ministry that we're doing. We've got to be willing to say, let's work together.
Yes.
And that's what I'd like to see us do.
I'd like to see that too. And I know that just from being out in the community and attending organization meetings, they really desire mm-hmm. that the church be a part of what they're doing. And so mm-hmm. I really think that the church needs to go to a level where we begin to train people to go outside the four walls.
I agree.
And begin to impact our community in lots of different ways. And we certainly have a mission feel here.
Right.
And I think, you know, Chief Datmar has pulled together a group, the Community Outreach mm-hmm. Committee, and that is his desire mm-hmm. to see us go into those different communities and help them raise the bar mm-hmm. and come up out of the things that they need to come out of, whether it's poverty or whether it's crime, those different kinds of things. And you and I both know that the church has the answer.
That's right.
And so
we can help people network together. We don't have all the answers by ourselves, but we do have the ability to network people together.
Yes. Okay, we have like one more minute.
Okay, sure.
And so is there just something that you would like to tell us about the First Methodist Church that you could say, or you want to invite people to come, just in a short address?
Just that I'm excited to be here in LaGrange, and I'm looking forward to what God is going to be doing through us, looking forward to us as a church becoming more involved with the community, more than we perhaps have been in the recent past. It used to be really connected when I was here 30 years ago with the community. It seems like it's gotten away from that. I want us to do that again, and I'm looking forward to the ways that God will invite people that are called to the type of ministry that I'm talking about and I've been talking about through our church to be able to be a part of that. So partnering not just through our church, but through our church with others as well.
Yes. So, well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for watching You Make the Difference. And remember, you truly do.